let's do it.
All right, well, it's an abnormally busy Nataba meeting. We normally get together, and I see some of the honourable Nataba members smiling at me. There are probably a half a dozen of us in here that meet on a relatively regular basis. So we're honoured to have everybody here today. But I'm going to give honour to the Nataba members for showing up for one more meeting. And the townspeople and our two prospective select board members. The reason I get to speak is because I'm not a citizen. And because I'm not a citizen, I'm not a voter in Northfield. I'm a resident in Northfield. But I'm able, therefore, to pass the microphone around on a totally neutral basis. We'll try and keep the 7 minutes to close to 7 minutes, but if somebody is on a roll, they might get an extra 30 to 50 seconds before we remind them with a sharp tug of the jacket that might be enough at this stage. But I'll ask, and we haven't really had a discussion as to whom should go first. I would suggest we maybe take Heath, because he's never been a select board member, to give us the first presentation. So in a second or two I'll ask him to take it away. And then Jack, and whom you've all met before, will give us his 7 minutes or 8 minutes, and we'll then round up, I think, with questions, and questions will then get approximately a short answer from both, or at least as long as it takes to answer the point from both. So if you have a specific question for one or the other, indicate that up front, and they'll get the first opportunity with the response. Anybody got any questions of me before we go any further? In which case, I'm going to ask Heath to pick it up. This is Heath Cummings. Give us your background.
Thank you, everybody. So I have been a resident of Northfield for the past 7 years. I've lived here with my wife, Sylvia, my wife of 13 years, and my son, Mason. He's in the elementary school. He's a 6th grader this year. We moved to town in 2012 and had a great experience living in this town, making a lot of friends. My background, I started out in law enforcement in 1999, started out in public safety. At the age of 18, and by the age of 22 I became proficient enough in my field that I was training other officers on the job. I've taken every job that I've ever had very seriously, making it the biggest priority in my life, and taking it as far as I possibly could. By the age of 25 I was hired as a security director and facilities director at a nearby college, and ran that department for 10 years. During that time, I became proficient enough in that job where I was hired by other schools to come to their schools and help out their trouble programs. When I had gotten to my job, there were a lot of problems in the position I was hired for. So I was hired to come in and really clean things up, get things organized very well. And our department became well known in the region for being one of the examples of what the department should look like. I was hired by other schools in the Northeast at about age 30 as a consultant because of the program that I had built. It had gained such a reputation that I went to other area schools and visited them to help them fix their trouble programs as well. And most recently worked for the town of Northfield for a year as a school resource officer, which was probably one of the greatest jobs I've ever had. Met a lot of the kids, a lot of community members, and it was a really great experience. Right now I'm the facilities and energy manager for the Gilmontague School District. I've been there for about 6 months, doing a lot of public appropriation, creating projects, a lot of green energy projects for the school district, getting a lot of problems squared away over there as well. It's another one of those jobs that I got into that was sort of a trouble department, and I'm now there trying to iron things out and square things away. And I kind of see Northfield at a similar point in its history right now. We've had a lot of negative headlines and stuff in the last couple of years, and I see a lot of room for improvement. The room for someone like myself to come in, take a broad overview of what's going on, and figure out how we can fix things, how we can get everybody around the table to work together. One of the examples of that was last night at the select board meeting. a lot of our friends and neighbors were at odds with each other over certain subjects, and I found that very troubling. And it was kind of eye-opening for me because I've never seen a community that had something like that happen. It was over the police chief's contract, which was what a lot of contention was about. I actually took the opportunity this afternoon to speak with Chief Layton for an hour in his office about last night. Because the main premise of me running for this election is to try to get everybody from both sides to work together. I'm very much in favor of the police department. I had a great experience working here, and they have created a wonderful, safe community for us. And seeing what happened last night was very troubling to me. So in talking with Chief Layton, I tried to address both sides of the table of what one side had for issues and what the other side had, and made some suggestions on the contract that was out there, what things could maybe be left off the table during the contractors and during his negotiations, things that maybe were given as a bit generous in the last contract negotiations. And I know he took those into honest consideration, but I feel like that kind of effort to take both sides of whatever issues we have going on and try to find the middle ground so that everybody feels like they're winning in a situation is the approach that we need to have. There's too much polarity in a lot of the issues that we're facing here in town, and that's my main mission coming into this. I have experience as a conflict resolution. I'm actually an instructor for management of aggressive behavior and conflict resolution, and I feel like some of that experience coming into this, I've been able to step back and look at a lot of situations and try to find that middle ground so that everybody can feel like they've got input that's valued by both sides and get to the destination that everybody's trying to get to. And I feel like that's what Northfield needs right now. When we chose to live here, we were shopping to live in Northfield about like 2010, 2011-ish. And everything was looking really good. That's why we chose to live here. Right now, if I were looking to shop for a town to move to with my family and raise a family here, I'm not honestly sure I would choose Northfield. If you Googled everything that was looking over the last couple of years, all the different things that we've seen and the headlines that we've made, they haven't exactly been that positive. And a lot of people that I've talked to in town, when I decided to run for this select board, have bringing up certain issues. And if somebody were shopping around and asked a resident of Northfield some of these questions, these are all going to come up. So what's going to bring people here? What's going to make people want to move here or work here when they see all the turmoil that we've had in the town hall lately? What's going to make people, when this school opens, want to move here with their families as opposed to another community nearby? What's going to make them want to come here and spend their tax dollars in a town hall where they feel like the residents don't feel like things are handled 100%? Those are the reasons why I want to get in here. I want to use that drive and the experience that I've had in my young life to get in and do what's best for this community. We're dug in. We're here for a while. We've only been here for 7 years, but my son's in 6th grade, and we've talked about, hey, would you ever want to go? And he's the boss. He doesn't want to go anywhere. He wants to spend his years through Pioneer and finish the years out with his son. And we really want to see this community thrive. And the potential of what is out there coming up is huge. We need to get ahead of a few issues. If this college does end up taking a foothold and moving forward and bringing people into town, we've got issues like our sewer issues that need to be taken care of. Our public safety departments need to have better facilities. We need to be proactive in getting ahead of the need before it's drawn on us and we're at a reactive mode of saying, well, now we're overtaxed with our sewers and our public safety and our DPW. How are we going to solve this? And then we're in reactive mode and we're working from behind. We need to get ahead of those things now. Study what we need to get a better police department, because I've seen the facilities that we had to work with for a year and they're very inadequate. And Chief Layton does the best job that he can with what he's given. And I think a lot of our departments around the town operate the same way. I really feel like these are all the reasons that are most important to me why we would want any select board candidate to come here. People who may have any sort of agendas or personal vendettas or personal interests don't belong here. And I can say straight out that I don't have any personal interests or vendettas. I want to see what's best for our town from top to bottom. That's why I'm running, and I hope to gain everybody's vote when the time comes.
We'll call that 8 minutes, but it's a good 8 minutes. I'm going to pass the microphone to Jack and ask for his vision for the next 3 years that you're looking at the present moment and see what you would like to add to the mix, and then we'll round out that discussion before we ask for questions. So go ahead, Jack.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Natava, for letting us sit down here. Over the years, many of you have come to know me, but let me go through some of my history and experience. For 19 years, I was a municipal civil engineer working on water, sewer, road, and solid waste projects throughout Massachusetts. I designed, bid, and oversaw construction of scores of municipal projects and worked with many funding and grant programs. I've served 1 year in the Finance Committee and 16 to 17 years on the Select Board, 8 years or so as chairman. As a member of the Select Board, I was guided by a philosophy to be fair to employees, volunteers, taxpayers, residents, and businesses. I have had no other agenda. I hope people feel I have met that agenda. I have strived to do more than the minimum on the board. By that I mean more than just showing up at the regular bi-weekly meetings. Some of the projects I worked on to move Northfield forward include the personnel policy. Early in my tenure, I worked with fellow board members to create the personnel policy from zero. It involved dozens and dozens of meetings, but we developed a personnel policy that's professional and has guided our employees and department heads for the past 15 years. Sidewalks. I spearheaded the sidewalk projects that gave us nearly 2 miles of new sidewalks. This took 8 years of seemingly countless meetings with agencies, committees, permitters, and legislatures. We used several grant sources for the project, and it was done all at no cost to the Northfield taxpayer. Master plan and zoning. I was very active in the development of the master plan and the updating of our zoning bylaws. I worked with many other Northfielders over many, many meetings to do that. The pipeline. During the pipeline controversy, I wrote an environmental report detailing the expected impacts from the pipeline in Northfield. After some expert editing by Jed, we sent it off to FERC and made it available to all affected communities and our residents. It summed up most of our major concerns and was definitely a stimulus for a lot of discussions. Other communities also found it informative and useful. No other community prepared a similar report. Guide to budget and taxation. Last year, after numerous comments I saw on Next Door Neighbors, I was shocked at how misinformed people were about the budget and taxation process. Consequently, I wrote a little primer, a guide to budgeting and taxation in Northfield, and I left 10 copies of that on the table by the camera. If you are interested, 'tis the budget season, or if you need a cure for insomnia. But people really don't know how it's done. It's very upfront, and I suggest take a look at it. I've tried to be a reasonable fiscal conservative. We got through the difficult early 2000s where we were always up against the levy limit and faced numerous 2.5 override votes. That gave me a very conservative fiscal perspective. When we started to receive the campus tax revenue, I always supported treating it as a one-time revenue source and not using it to expand the operating budget, but using it to fund badly needed capital improvements that were not able to be done through the early 2000s and before. The last budget I worked on last year was $600,000 below the levy limit, saving $1.40 on the tax rate. Much has been said about transparency lately, and I agree that transparency is critical. Over my 16 years, we had no open meeting law violations. I have been willing to meet with anyone to discuss any town issues. For the past 6 years, I met with the seniors before all town meetings to explain all the articles. Going forward, I agree with Heath on some of the concerns. I've been through it before, and I know how painful it is. But I also see some major fiscal and economic concerns. Our tax rate is going up, and we need to try to stem that trend. It will require serious fiscal discipline. The value of our residential real estate property has been declining over the past 9 years. Why is that? Can we improve on that? A declining residential property value results in a higher tax rate. Northfield received a lot of revenue from the Northfield Mountain transmission improvements recently, and the town levy limit increased accordingly. The work was valued at about $50 million, representing about an $800,000 increase to the levy limit. Since those improvements are classified as personal property, they will depreciate in value, and if we continue to use that increased revenue, the tax burden will shift to our residents. Fiscal discipline will be critical. Because the NMH campus properties are now tax exempt, it will be important to continue not to rely on that revenue for the operating budget. We must also balance the need to welcome and facilitate the Moody Center and Thomas Aquinas College with the need to negotiate a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. After a year away from town government, I would like to return to serve Northfield once again. I am open to taking any questions on anything.
Before we start the questions, because there should be plenty, and I see multiple reasons that people would have issues they'd like to discuss. But let me just say that I'm a similar implant in Northfield for the last 10 years. I've sat on the side of the original discussions for forming the first town governance committee because of some of the issues that had come up over the years. I observed and welcomed the input from that first town formal formation of the town governance committee at town meeting. My background is somewhat different. I come from I would describe myself as somewhat of a social engineer. Spent 10 years as a management consultant, getting involved in various sizes of organizations. So the model of a town with representative government at town meeting as the primary source is something that's of significant interest, just for the point of view of a stage in life. That town governance committee made some solid recommendations that resulted in a change to the town administrator position. That has led to a second evaluation being carried out by a second group. I went to the focus group meeting that they had the other evening, and in fact it's impressed me considerably that the town governance committee that you've had working for you for the last year and a bit has formed a cohesive group, and they have some pretty supportive recommendations to place before you at town meeting, which will include the possibility of moving from a 3-person select board to a 5-person select board. So I'd also like to say that you have to be impressed with these two gentlemen sitting on both sides of me at the present moment. We are fortunate to be able to present those two people to you with that level of interest and enthusiasm and knowledge to give you the opportunity to ask questions. If they, as inevitably must be the case, only one will be picked at this stage. It is obviously, if the town decides that next year they would move to a 5-person board, we would certainly consider it a waste if we failed to attract one of them back. So I ask you to remember that as you point your questions for them this evening, and I'd suggest that anybody from the floor might put a hand up and indicate what they would like. Joan.
Give me a second to get to you with the microphone. I put a chill on it.
We're open for questions.
There you go.
Hi, Bill McKay. As you know, of our 3,000 residents, 1,000 of us are over the age of 60, and that will soon be even more than 1/3. Pretty soon we're going to be running 40% of our town is going to be over 60 years old. And I'd like you to address the possibility of a community/senior center in the not too distant future that would serve the needs of both our seniors, the need for a community recreational area and something along that line.
Would you like to direct it to either one
No,
first?
but I'd like to hear from both of them, please.
Just before you start, what we'd like to do for ground rules is give everyone who wants one question first, and then for those who want to come back for follow-up, do that, but give everyone who wants
Well-
to ask one question.
All right. I guess it calls to me as to who's to answer that question first.
Jack.
All right, let's go with Jack.
I've always been in favor of senior center / community center. Third or fourth year on the board, we had a study done to determine the need and even came up with a conceptual design. But as with all of these things, it's only money. At the time, such a senior center, community center was going to be about 1.2, 1.4 million, and that was 15 years ago. In addition to probably adding a full-time or at least 20-hour-a-week custodial staff. Anything like that, I'm open to putting it on the town meeting warrant. I would speak in favor of it. However, being a political nerd, I wouldn't put my money on that would pass and get the appropriation at this time. We have other needs that are going to be fighting for that. The emergency services facility. There's been some thought that maybe somehow those two projects could be combined at the same time, either by using more of the space in town hall for the senior center, or I've heard people talk about using the EMS facility to expand on it and build a senior center. But again, it's only money. We can put it out before the voters, see what they think. But you're right, Bill. I think there is a need for it.
Can I ask Heath to comment on that topic?
So, before we moved to Northfield, I lived in the town of Irving and worked there as well for a long time. And I was there as an employee and a resident when we built the senior center down there. They have a great senior center. It's beautiful, it's big, but it did cost a lot of money. And Irving has a much lower tax rate, but the usage of it was used very well. I see our town demographic getting much more use out of a facility than Irving. I mean, obviously our population is larger, and I'm pretty sure after looking at some of the demographics, we have more of a higher percentage of senior citizens that live here. Like Jack said, everything, it does come down to money. And I think that the resources that are going to get taxed immediately with the potential of the school coming in and everything has to be of the highest priority. But in some of the shifts of the spaces that might get opened up within the town hall, the police department is right next door to the senior center. Could the senior center at some lower rate be expanded and renovated to include that room and expand on what's there, kind of renovate it and make it much better? I'd say that this is the kind of thing that we develop a committee for. And start to have the conversation, look at places, look at what people are looking for out of it, and try to find multiple solutions. So as these avenues open up, if we get a public safety complex and we're going to renovate some part of the town hall for a senior center, what improvements could be made out of that would be sufficient for the needs that people might be proposing. So coming up with the community, with a committee that's working on that project sooner than later might be a great idea. And then start to facilitate that conversation on really what everybody's looking for, and how far can we actually take it, and what will it actually cost for us to make a dedicated senior center down the road.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Bob McKeown.
Hello. I'm glad this night is happening. This is a question for you, Jack, and I'm going to preface the question with saying that I've supported you in every run for office in the past. I voted for you, and maybe you weren't challenged some of the time. I don't remember. I was always happy working with you. You're knowledgeable, you're capable, but I saw in the last year and a half or 2 years of your term a very angry, frustrated, disgruntled guy. It was on display sometimes on television at the meetings. It was on display a lot of times in private. in different things. I wanted to question you about, especially because you opened up the door, about the Moody Center. We had a discussion at executive session, assessors and the select board, if you recall what I'm referencing here. Willie was there, a person that you had disdain for, the town administrator. And the discussion was, and I have some email traffic that goes to that, the Moody Center was going to pay us half their tax rate in a pilot form of program. And we were discussing that night. And there was Tracy and you from the select board in attendance, and you slammed your fist on the table and walked out the door. It didn't happen because of that. The traffic was that Willie said they were going to balk, they wanted a decision quickly. And that just shows me that when you are using these words about fiscal discipline, I have trouble believing that. And I'd like you to convince me how you would be a selectman again and not be angry and not have those kinds of examples.
Can I
Thanks.
just obviously we're we want to limit the discussion to, and it's a good question, how does one feel about taking place again in town governance when there have been periods of time when it's been frustrating? So I'll encourage Jack to answer that question, but just avoid getting into the discussion of what will we actually do about the payments in lieu of taxes.
I asked that because Jack opened the door to that, talking about the
I understand.
Moody Center.
But in general, I'm just trying to set the tone so that essentially we focus it on the question that's at hand.
To start with, I completely disagree with your characterization, Bob. I'm at a loss, and I'm sorry you're asking personal questions like that. I'm glad to talk about the Moody Center in that meeting. The Moody Center wanted to pay 50% of their taxes for that year. 62% of their property was taxable that year. Okay? So that's a net decrease the town will be getting. They hadn't applied for an abatement. For the assessors to make an arbitrary decision to drop the taxable rate from 62 to 50, I don't even think was legal. Willie misrepresented that was not a pilot, that was a tax negotiation, which was not legal.
Well, I'd like to go on, but you don't want me to. I
think we should avoid getting too deep
Okay.
into these issues just for the purpose of giving everybody the opportunity to ask questions. So it's a good answer, Jack. At this point, let's just take it as read. That's where you guys are standing, and we'll leave it as round one.
Hi. So I had a question that you actually a little bit addressed in the very beginning, which was there has been a lot of discussion about the possibility of going to town meeting with a change in the structure of the select board from a 3-person board to a 5-person board. And I'm just interested to know what each of your thoughts are on that, if you see it as what your thoughts are.
Can I ask Heath to take that one first, and then we'll pick up with Jack?
Sure. So I think obviously having more people that are willing to step up and more perspectives, more of the ability to balance things out would be a better idea. I know how limited some of the select board races have been since we've lived here. There's only been one candidate sometimes. I'm hopeful that maybe it just seems like there's been more of an interest coming up with more of the people in my generation or even younger with Alex Meisner, how he was stepping up. So hopeful that would continue, that more people would want to step up into those roles to fulfill that. That would be the only thing that I think would become an issue with moving to a 5-person. I mean, I'd have to look into a little bit more as far as what drawbacks other towns might have had. I think reaching out to other towns that have switched and ask about how things have gone for them might be a great thing. See what's worked for them and what hasn't. If they've switched and now they have 5 and they wish they never did it, that would be great for us to know. But with such a small select board, it can get very polarized. If you have 2 people that are biased in one direction, it's going to be like that for the entire term. So I think expanding it to 5 would help eliminate some of that.
Good, thank you.
I am strongly against that. The past 20 select board elections, only about half of them have been contested. An election is about giving the residents, the voters of Northfield, a choice where you want the town to go into in the future. So with 3 selectmen, half the elections the past 20 years, the town has not been given a choice. And to throw 3 more or 2 more elections every 3 years, to me, the situation is only going to get worse. Northfield has a bad track record for getting people out to run. I think Heath and I are the only competitive election in town for any position. And if you also look at the Commonwealth, Northfield has a population of 3,000. If you look at the towns with a population of 5,000 and under, there's about 100 of them. Only 7 of those towns have 5 selectmen. And 4 of those are in the Cape. Pretty much all the Cape towns have 5 selectmen. It's kind of a political culture down there. But again, over 90% of the towns below 5,000 have 3 selectmen. I've worked with 9 colleagues over my course of serving the town, and I've never heard one of them say, wouldn't this be better if we had 5 selectmen? But for the most part, it's the choice. If you don't give Northfielders a choice, then someone just walks in and does what they want. It's not the way to go.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
All right.
I'll wait for the follow-up time.
We'll see if anybody has another question. There's a question over here. Judy.
Hi, Judy Phillips. My question has to do with how do you see resolving our water problem in this town, which also relates to sewer, but that we don't own our water. It's owned by independent organizations, and it's breaking down. What do you see as, how would you resolve this problem?
Do you want to pick a preference for a first answer?
No.
Let me throw it at Heath first.
So the few people that are having a lot of issues with the water systems up on the near the campus area, I've talked to a few people, and their concerns are we don't really care how it gets fixed. It just needs to get fixed. But the money becomes the issue again with that. With fixing those aging systems, it's going to cost significant amounts of money. So where can that come from? Who's going to pay for it? Because obviously we have, like the gentleman stated earlier, a lot of people are on fixed incomes. There's no easy answer for that one. At least I don't have an easy answer for that one. There's a lot of different avenues we can maybe look into. I mean, it's the bottom line is going to come down to we have to pay for something within the town. That comes down to the sewer system as well. Hearing all the issues with the sewer system that they're having, it's only going to get worse. These are issues that we do have to put at the forefront and have these discussions sooner than later. But I think that's a larger community solution, because the number one surefire answer is raise taxes and pay for it. But that's not reasonable for a lot of people. I mean, even myself, I'm not on a fixed income. We own a decent amount of property, but our taxes are 4 times higher moving to Northfield than they were when we were in Irving. And to have them go even higher, it would be very difficult for us to go even higher than we've already gone. So I feel the pain of everybody who would be in that similar situation. The short answer, the long answer, I guess, is there is no easy answer for that one. I think there's a lot of discussions and a lot of different people we need to turn to ask for help with this situation, because obviously we had an easy answer and somebody here to answer that, we'd already be working on that solution. Right now it seems like it's at a stalemate. What do we do and where do we turn to?
Okay, thank you. Right.
Unfortunately for the water, the select board has no statutory authority. You have a private water company, it's Northfield Water Company, and a separate independent municipality, the Northfield Water District. Where the select board, what I would like to see happen is that the select board sit down with the commissioners of the water district, with representatives of East Northfield Water Company, and find out specifically what their problems are. Northfield Water District has their own problems with the Main Street water main. The East Northfield Water Company has potentially facing a filtration facility, and when you go to filtration, you need a storage tank. And that doesn't even include some of the fire flow problems they have there. But what sort of project could we put together that could benefit both entities and apply for a Mass Works grant? This is a Mass State Public Works grant program that takes applications every August. And maybe there's something we could put together that would benefit both utilities, that maybe there's some creative ways to resolve the need for filtration in the East Northfield Water Company. I always thought the Water District has voted in the past not to allow the East Northfield Water Company to join the Water District. But what if the East Northfield Water Company just became one giant customer of the Northfield Water District, and they get off their reservoir and they buy their water from the Northfield Water District? I think the well has the capacity for that, and that would mean that the Water District would not take up the maintenance requirements of the East Northfield Water Company's distribution system. But I think there are some things that could be schemed out. In the past, the Select Board has worked on a smaller basis on Captain Beers Plain Road. I think in the mid 2000s, people there, their wells were going dry or caving in. It was very sandy deposit. They were having problems getting a suitable well for their homes. We worked with the Franklin Regional Housing and Redevelopment Authority to get a block grant, and we used about $50,000 to extend the water main, I don't know, half a mile, quarter mile, down Captain Beers Plain Road to serve those people. So even though we weren't part of the Water District, we were able to work and get grant money to do that work. So it can be done. It's a little complicated when the problems are much bigger, but if you don't start talking about it, it's not going to happen.
Can we look for another question? It's not that it isn't a great question, but it's just that we can't hope to solve the Water District's problem in 1/2 hour tonight.
This lady was next.
I
Sorry?
want to ask some questions about the school district and your thoughts on the financial problems that Pioneer Valley Regional's been having. Some are outside of their control. Declining rural enrollment is across the state. Some is self-imposed. They have been inaccurately budgeting and not managing their funds as well. What are your thoughts on potential closure of the Warwick Elementary School and the Leiden Elementary School as one measure to trim the budget and provide more funds for the students rather than spreading it out over 4 elementaries?
I'm going to ask Jack to see if he would respond to that first, and then Heath can come in and give us the benefit of your background too. So Jack, go ahead.
Well, there's no doubt the school district has some financial management problems. And demographics have not been kind to the schools lately. In the past 7-8 years, enrollment's down 35%. The Leiden School, I think they only have 29 or 30 students. So for 7 grades, pre-K up, actually 8 grades, pre-K through 6, you know, that's averaging 4 kids in a grade. That can't be good for them socially, and it's not a cost-effective way to educate them. Something has to be done, something drastic, and I think unless you severely cut back on teachers and instructors, the closing of those schools, unfortunately, is something that has to be seriously considered and, in my mind, implemented.
Heath, any comment?
So in working, you know, I was basically a 50-50 employee for the town and the school district when I was a school resource officer. And having developed a lot of relationships with administrators, I saw a lot of what happened on the inside. I heard a lot of explanations about what led for the demise of where the school district has ended up now with its budget. A lot of it was a lack of thorough oversight with the budget and how things were being spent. It was like things were just going out the door and there was no accountability. When the dollars were supposed to be reported to the school committee, it was a shell game. The previous superintendent was, putting money from here to there, and the next meeting it would be moved all over the place. Now with the addition of a finance director, full-time finance director, and John Schedule, the superintendent, I've seen the things that they've put the brakes on and stopped some of the damage. And at least the money that was already expected to be the deficit has shrunk significantly. I've heard the plans of what the superintendent has to generate a little bit more revenue, to do some things to bring more kids into the district. There are already a lot of things that he's doing now that really aren't making that many headlines. They're bringing a program from GCC to get some criminal justice courses taught at the school right now, currently. They wanted to expand that even further and bring in more of a public safety thing where kids could come to the Pioneer and leave with an EMT certification, firefighter, and potentially a police certification. There's nothing like that around. There's no schools in this area that are doing that. The nearest ones are, I believe in Pennsylvania was the nearest one that we could find. You're shaking your head no.
No, I work with them a lot. There's many in Connecticut, and a lot of other schools are going into that, yes.
And it's a big draw for a lot of different kids who want to do those kinds of jobs.
There's a school-to-work program nationally going on.
That's great. And how the tech school is drawing a lot of our students, I could see this drawing a lot of students from other areas. So that was something I had talked about when I was up there, and I think there's still plans to pull all that in. In the short term, where Leiden and Warwick come in, given the plans that the superintendent has come up with and the other things that they could possibly do in the near future to put the brakes on where the deficit has gone and see if they can turn things around, I'm hopeful that maybe if they held off on closing those schools, they could give it a little bit more time. Because I know how much those schools mean to those communities. I visited them once a week and went up there and met with the kids and met with the teachers, and this was a huge thing on their minds. So I could see what it means to close one of those schools. If you were a resident in Warwick and the school closed, I mean, what would make people want to move to a town that doesn't have a nearby elementary school? So I know it's huge for them. So whatever the school district can do to prevent those closures, I think is huge for those two communities. For the survival of the district, it may be necessary, but I know those conversations are happening to prevent that from happening at all costs. But hopefully they can prevent it, because I know how much it means to those towns.
Good answer. Somebody asked another hand up. Yes, the hand up over here.
This question's going to start for Jack, but I would like both candidates to answer it, please. Jack, you didn't seek re-election last year, and it was quoted in a paper because of town administration issues. I also believe, I may be incorrect on the date, but October of 2010, you resigned from the select board as well.
Yes.
Looking back at some minutes, that was right after some town personnel policies and things like that were signed in. So my question to you and Heath as well is, in moving forward, when we're dealing with personnel issues or administration issues, what is your plan? It seems like, I don't want to say you ran from it, but it seemed like things could have been different to move forward.
Are you talking about in 2010 or this past year?
Well, more so moving forward, what can we do to looking at administration issues? If we have an issue with administration or personnel, what are you going to do to move forward with that?
I had administrator issues. I was chairman in the fall of 2017, working with our new town administrator, and let's see, I'm limited by what I can say for legal purposes. I did my best to work with them. I resigned as chairman and decided not to run again. Tracy Rogers took up the chairmanship, and lo and behold, she had the same issues. Okay? It was not with the form of government. I've worked with 9 town administrators in Northfield, and I worked with probably 20 town administrators through my engineering career. But I have no problem with the town government, with the empowered town administrator. I think it's a great thing. But our previous town administrator created a lot of stress for me. I had some health problems at the time, and I couldn't stay with it. But I've worked with 9 town administrators successfully over the 16 years, but this guy, I was unable to work with him. I'm looking forward, if elected, to working with Andrea and get her, help her get settled. She's been in only a few months, but if I'm elected, I'll help her get settled in for the rest of her duration, which I hope is 15 years.
Perhaps longer than the 3-year period we're talking about.
Yes. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was not an administration issue, it was an administrator issue.
All right, thank you, Jack. I'm going to ask Heath just to throw us his thoughts on this area, if there are any that you'd like to add to at this point.
So, in being a director on a small college campus, I worked on a campus with 800 employees, 1,600 students, a lot of difficult personalities. Every one of the opportunities that I had to take training on how to do conflict resolution, even down to helping students in distress, recognizing when some of my student employees were not having circumstances in life work out in their best favor, to recognize when they needed help, get them out of work, send them off to go get help, whatever they needed. Those are all bits and pieces of the tools that you need to be a successful leader. You don't just need to be elected into a position. You don't need to just get a job and collect a paycheck. You need to do it well. You need to keep on learning and gaining the skills that you need to have so that when you're faced with any certain type of personality, any certain type of situation, you can persevere. You can help that situation, no matter what it is, and power through it. I've had a career over the last, it was 18 years that I was in law enforcement. That job was stressful. That job was the type of one where you were constantly running into people's problems. You were running towards the problems when some people were running away. That's not how I operate. I tackle all problems head on. Like I had said in the beginning, I like to have people reach a midpoint. Now, there are difficult employees that you have to deal with where sometimes difficult decisions have to be made and you have to go down the road of disciplinary action, sometimes up to leading to termination. Those are issues that I've dealt with. They're very unpleasant. But that's where your policies and procedures come in. And being an employee for this town for a year, yes, there were a policy and procedures manual, but there's a lot to be added onto there as well. I've created policies and procedures for departments on my own, for a department I ran, as well as other schools. Ours can be improved upon. When I was leaving last fall, we didn't even have direct deposit. It's 2019 and we didn't even have direct deposit in this town. I had to take a physical paycheck and go and cash it every day. There's no personnel review process. I didn't know how well I was doing as an employee. Those things need to be added. Those are all the types of improvements that can be made on this town that I would like to start to implement, because that's what makes people and employees feel valued in their job and want to stay here as an employee.
Thanks, Heath. That's a pretty good answer. I'll come back to you just in a second, Steve. Just go ahead with your question. I'd be interested to hear what it is.
Welcome to the March Nataba meeting. This is the Northfield Area Tourism and Business Association, and my question also includes our moderator, who is our representative to a committee to create a business park. And we're talking about revenue shortfalls, we're talking about aging out and not having enough money to do this and to do that. What about planned economic development? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm flattered that you even mentioned my name, but
don't let it go to your head.
You have half the committee sitting here at the present moment, almost. The reality is it's a very early stages. I was actually hoping you'd pick up on the threads of the town governance and the need for policy and procedures manual, which is a sort of recommendation which is coming out for the second iteration of the town governance work that's been done over the last year, they recognize clearly that that's something that will help Northfield establish a slightly better playing field. I'm an admirer of what was done by the first Town Governance Committee, where essentially the recruitment and selection of an empowered administrator was a bold effort, but obviously, looking at the history that Heath mentioned in the introduction to the evening tonight, there's been a lot of turmoil, and that is a mechanism that will in time settle things down.
We've had a rough start.
The work that's being done and in the various committees in town, and I have to say that when you look at Northfield as a social lab, I have never seen a small town with 33 groups of people that are prepared to go to a spaghetti dinner and talk about their processes. It's quite extraordinary what is actually being done in this town, and it does provide a certain amount of turbulence, for lack of a better expression. You're right. We can see that, to go to Bill's point, that if you like, it's a senior group that's getting larger, and therefore the services for senior is the growth industry in reality in Northfield. Obviously, it would be advantageous, excuse me, advantageous to the young families in town. Excuse me, hold on, this will take a second. Advantageous to the younger families in town to know they have a career nearby that essentially can provide a living wage, that can provide a basis for benefits, for health insurance, for saving for retirement, for educating their children and bringing them up through the facilities that we have in town. Jack's comment that essentially all of us are exposed to the threat that essentially our house prices are not necessarily appreciating as fast as the rest of the state, which makes it difficult to consider how you're going to get out of Northfield. I don't know if any of you ever thought of that, short of taking Bill's option of the senior. Which also, significantly, is the mechanism which is keeping the prices depressed, because when you're buying houses that have been left by a departing member of the community, there's no great pressure on an upward sales price. The residents and all the inheritors are essentially happy to sell the property and pick up their check and move on. So I don't think we want to dwell overly much on that, Steve, but yes, the business park has again, through an initiative that was voted in at town meeting in November, has been formed. Yeah. We've had a couple of meetings. Yeah. We're talking to the Franklin County Regional Council of Governments, and we're looking at ways in which we can find some help. But it's going to be a fairly serious project that will take 2, 3, 4 years to mature.
Well, I'd love to hear from them too about it. What they think about economic development in town.
All right. Jack, why don't you pick up that, because you're well equipped to answer it.
I think that economic development is critical, and I asked to be on the business park committee. I think we need something local that will provide good benefited jobs. It would be good to have a steady industrial and commercial businesses that provide tax revenue continuously. I think providing that type of situation, the jobs and the added revenue, will help our declining residential property. We have a lot of open space in town, and that's good. But if there's no emphasis on economic development, you run the danger of being what I would call a boutique town, which means it's pretty exclusive, it's pretty, the tax rates are huge, and you can't find a job in town. So I think this business park thing is very important. We've met with the COG last week, as John said. Unfortunately, we found out there's some potential grant money, but we met with them on a Wednesday, and the grant application was due on Friday. So Our schedule is trying to put together some educational materials on the need and the benefits of such a program, and come up with a scope of services for a professional feasibility study that would show where possibly something could go, what infrastructure would be needed, and more professionally, I hate to say this, but document the need and the benefit. But since we missed that grant deadline, well, I won't say we missed it, it was poor timing. We're going to be working in the next year to get to that stage where we can put together a very competitive grant application for those funds.
Heath, do you want to pick up on the threads of anything that may have come to mind?
Sure. So, like Jack said, getting a feasibility study and community committees together is going to be one of the biggest parts of that, because a lot of people in this town don't want to see Northfield turn into somewhere that has too much retail areas. They like the small town feel, they like the open spaces. The problem with that is if we don't do something, if we don't capitalize with the campus coming here and getting some potential business and retail that could maybe coincide with that, then we're going to run the risk of our tax rates going up. Things aren't going to get any better. We're going to continue to have these problems that we're having with infrastructure all over the place. And one of the only ways that I can really see that we're going to be able to get some sort of a savior with increased revenue coming to town is going to this business park. There's a lot of work that's got to be done with it. It's got to be done right. I know that Bernardston has some things starting to pop up, and there's a lot of residents there that are in opposition to it. They all went to vote for it, but now that it's actually a reality and it's coming there, there's a ton more opposition to these things coming in. So, we have to have very open, widely publicized community conversations about this, because it will change the dynamic of the town. Any retail or business park that we put in here, any industry, it's going to significantly change the way the town is. So we have to make sure that we do it right, and it's just going to require a lot of headfront conversations before any real shovels start moving or anything. So
I think Jack and I would both second that. We've met with Barry Bordner, who's the chair of the group, and he's been insistent that we develop slowly and make sure that people get the message and get the opportunity to let us know how they feel. We're getting close. It's 8:25. At 8:30 is when we're aiming to stop, and the space station runs over at 8:40 if anybody wants to rush out and see it. But I'm happy to hear any more questions that people would like to have. There is one here, so let me have a show of hands as to who else might have a question, just to see how many we might be facing. 2. Any others? 2? In that case, let's have it at the front, and your number. Take a number 2. All right. Come, ask your question up front.
Hi, Karen Boudreau. I hear a lot about the challenges that are here. There's a laundry list of items that have to be addressed: the water, the sewer, and it just goes on. In a representative form of government, who prioritizes that laundry list? How is that decided? How do you allocate the funds? How do you make those decisions? It's going to be this one or that one, and then how is it rolled out?
It's complicated because we have 2 different water companies, and we have a sewer system that's run by the sewer commissioners. So the Select Board has no direct statutory role, but as I said before, we can help facilitate, solve problems. If there's a problem that needs to be resolved and it requires some financial assistance that the selectmen have control over, the town administrator normally would bring that issue up at a select board meeting in the context of, you guys have to make a decision on, do you want to do this drainage project, or do you want to pay 4 Mile Brook Road, something like that. So the select board would be getting the information, permitting requirements, costs, what have you, from either the department head and or the town administrator, and then they vote. which project's going to take priority. Normally, what happens, I haven't been following the budget process this year. There's a laundry list of capital planning projects that may include construction. It may include new dump trucks. It may include new cruisers. The select board goes through that whole list, and their homework is to prioritize in their mind what's most important. They come to the next meeting, you add up all the scores, and that determines the preliminary prioritization of the select board moving forward to speak with the finance committee, and hopefully the finance committee buys what the select board wants to do. They usually do, and that's more or less how it gets done.
Let me ask Heath to pick up that discussion, and then we've got Lewis at the back. If you'd like to comment on any developments in the finance committee, you're welcome to do so, Lewis. But go ahead.
So, in the role that I have now at the school district in Gil Montague, there's numerous projects. It's, you know, the microcosm, it's like a small version of a town. There's so many different infrastructure issues that need to be done. I see the select board being a three-person version of what I do as a singular person. You have certain things out of operating budgets that can be fixed and can be worked out, and sometimes there's projects that exceed what you can do with your operating budget, so you have to go to capital planning. Prioritization sometimes is the right word. Sometimes it's triage, because you're literally taking one emergency and weighing it over the next one and saying which one of these dire emergencies is the most important one. So weighing those things out, it's the select board that has to agree upon those kind of things, and like you said, move them forward to votes as needed. Taking the opportunity to use existing budget money where it does exist. I don't know the ins and outs of our current budget and, within the DPW, like how much they have to replace certain amounts of infrastructure within the town. Typically, with a good operating budget and planning forefront, you have those kind of things in the back of your mind when you're planning your budget for the next year. You know that a certain road has just been a problematic one, certain small culverts and bridges, so you have those things built in. But it's all a planning process. I mean, you can't just take the loudest voice and say, yes, sure, we'll listen to you because you got the most people to show up to our meeting and beat the door down that you need to have this project done. It's really that can be a factor in how you weigh things out, but you really have to sit back and administratively look at these problems and say, what can we realistically do and what needs to be done immediately.
Can I just, Lois, I'd just invite you, you've been in the position long enough to know, is there anything you hope for in the next 3 years that essentially we would see the direction of the Finance Committee relationship with the town organization?
You're on the spot.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, as far as our action right now, the deadline that the select board set for the receipt of articles was yesterday. So we're just getting all the articles that the different departments have. We were aware of some of them because when they came in for their budget discussions with us, they made us aware of them. Some of them did. So we know about that. As far as working with the select board, we've always worked well with the select board. I don't like to go to town meeting with a difference of opinion on things. So when we, as Jack told about their prioritized list, we go through and see what we feel that we can recommend as to when we consider the availability of money. And we try to, if there are any differences, we try to reconcile them, and we're usually successful. One issue that sometimes we have a little problem with is the school budget, and we're doing our best on that. Just so you know, on that, there's some criticism of that and what's being done about it, and I think it's something that hasn't been done for quite a few years, but we have been able to get the group of 4 towns, select boards and finance committee members together for meetings and come up with a common idea of what we can support to the school in the way of budget. And I hope that we can continue a good relationship with the select board. It's not a we-they type of thing. We're working together for the best of the community.
Thank you. We had a question at the back, and that I'm going to make the last question, and unless somebody's got something that's really pressing and would like to make a special venture. But please give us your question.
Yeah, hi. My name is Joe Stacy. My question is a quick one. Could probably be answered simple yes or no. I'm just touching on a previous topic we covered. If the town was to decide to move from a 3 to a 5-person select board, you didn't win this race, would you come back and serve on the 5-person select board?
I'm going to ask Jack.
That's too far in the future for me to answer that truthfully.
Heath.
Emphatically, yes. This is something that I feel, as long as we're going to be living here, then yes, absolutely. I can't be the kind of person who sees problems and wants to complain about them but doesn't do something about it. So, absolutely.
Well, in the interest of sticking to calendar time, and it's Tuesday evening and it's 8:30, are we ready to say thank you to these two gentlemen for their participation? Joan, would you like to close us out?
Well, thank you very much. We hope if you'd like to know more about Natava, you give us a call, pick up our tourism guide, look at visit northfieldarea.com. Members that extend from Winchester, New Hampshire, all the way down to South Deerfield, because tourists don't recognize boundaries, state boundaries. So it's a great group. Pick one up, and if you'd like to come to the meeting the last Tuesday in April and meet the new Chamber of Commerce person, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much for all your participation.
Thank you for doing it.